Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the gift ships, the tech tree ships you can get completely for free, even just by logging into the game. If you haven't been playing this game recently at all, you will be able to get a tech tree ship, a tier 8 tech tree ship, just by logging in here in the gifts tab. By the time this video goes up, this should be live as I'm recording it. We still have 1 day to wait. But this is the list of ships: Akizuki, North Carolina, U-190, Implacable, Harbin, Shimakaze, Balao, Schlieffen, Audacious, or Gouden Leeuw. I'm bad with pronunciations, I do apologize. But an interesting list of ships, and this appears to be the Christmas gift. So I complained, certainly, maybe a little too much in the Lugdunum and Tangshi videos. You can go back and look for more of my thoughts on that. But Sharn 43 was the premium gift ship last year. This year, it looks like they're giving away some tech tree ships to people. To me, this feels a little more like a substitute for the Bismarck or Yamato that you could receive for free if you hadn't been playing the game last Christmas. But I can see this also being a little bit more like Sharn 43, since this is available for every player, not just people who hadn't been playing for a few months. This is available even if you have been playing quite a bit, which is nice to have. If you want to see your progress, you can go over into the armory and check it out. 10,000 milestone points does get you up to Santa's gift containers. But if you want the tier 10 tech tree ship, it's only requiring 7,500, which is quite a lot still. A few Santa's gifts things, of course. But just by logging in, you get a tier 8. So you don't even need to get any points. So if you haven't been playing, this is an interesting opportunity to get kickstarted up a tech tree line, which is nice to see. And if we look here in the combat missions tab, here's the expedition to the North Pole. Here's the previous time through missions. There should be missions available through December as well, or at least the beginning portions, to grind a few points here and there. But for the most part, you had to be playing a few updates before this Christmas update to get enough points for the tier 10 ship. Still though, to get a tech tree tier 8 is a nice reward for those who hadn't been playing for a while and log back in this update. So today we're going to talk about these ships, a brief overview, some of the strengths and weaknesses, maybe playstyle recommendations on which ship you might like to get. And over the next few days, I will try to go over these ships in more dedicated videos, actually show you some gameplay of them. But I really wanted to get out a more overview video, since there are quite a few options, and maybe some of them you don't really know which one you're looking at. And let's start with the Akizuki. And I figured out how to get the battle button when you're looking at your ship, by the way. You just got to click exterior. As a nice aside to get some more usability back to this port. But Akizuki is an excellent tier 8 gunboat destroyer. Very, very fun to play. You get fast reloading 100mm guns here with solid HE pen. This ship also gets some decent torpedoes. Longer reload, you only get 4 of them, but there is a reload booster here, so not too bad on the torpedo loadout, as well as having a very, very nice smokescreen. It allows you to farm battleships, cruisers, without being spotted. This ship is quite slow. You need to make use of that smokescreen to actually farm effectively without taking a lot of damage. Since it does have some nice HP, but it's slow enough that regularly you will be getting hit if you're open water. It's pretty hard to dodge with this ship. But it's a very, very powerful tier 8 gunboat DD, and the tier 9 and tier 10 are certainly quite nice as well to grind towards. As for the commanders, I'm going to try to limit myself to 14 points with the tier 8s, and then when we get to the tier 10s, maybe up to 18 points. I'm not going to fully build them out, but as a recommendation, whenever you're playing DDs, you want to start off with these points along the right side. Always wanting more HP, you need to keep your engine and rudder working, or at least partially working when they get knocked out. Last stand is crucial. Preventive maintenance is excellent because DD modules, guns, torpedo tubes, engines, rudders, they always get knocked out. So a little more HP there is excellent. And of course, concealment. For 10 points, always just take these 4 skills. That's what I'm going to recommend. And then Adrenaline Rush is excellent. This is just always valuable in basically every game. If you got more points, you know, maybe speccing in a little bit like that, maybe some extra fires, perhaps going with some torpedo speed. I don't know. Maybe more like that, I guess, if you have more points. Getting more smokes allows you to use them more aggressively, but at least to start with, I think this is a reasonable build. And for the equipment slots, I do think you want concealment as well as propulsion. The recommended here is very, very good. Aiming systems mod is solid. Akizuki is a slow gunboat DD, but is very, very fun to play, and I think is, if you're looking for a tier 8, it's one of the more enjoyable ones. This and the North Carolina are my two recommended ones, I guess, for tier 8. The rest I'm a little less interested in. So let's take a look at that North Carolina. One of my favorite battleships. It's classic. It's been in the game for a very long time, and it's a solid ship. It does lack a little bit in the shell velocity though, so if you're playing battleship, it can be difficult to lead these guns, but they're relatively accurate and you're quite tanky as well, which is really, really nice to have. You got solid armor and your heals are very nice. They're slightly improved heals, healing you for a little bit more HP. It's just a very standard battleship playstyle. If you're looking to learn battleships, get into battleships, the American line and the Japanese lines are always going to be my recommendations, since they don't really rely on gimmicks. They just have a solid baseline foundation for you to learn best practice battleship play, I suppose, that then you can take to some of the more gimmick-heavy lines, and you at least have a solid foundation to step off from. As for the build here, it's a little difficult to not have that extra healing, but I do think concealment and fire prevention are just so important. 12.3 kilometer detect is excellent here on North Carolina. It allows you to surprise ships by not being detected and then firing at a ship that may not know you're there. That's a really good strategy to employ when playing a battleship. The guns are very solid and a decent amount of HP. But once you get a little more points on your commander, I think Emergency Repair Expert is very nice, getting that 5th heal. And if you're not surviving as long to fires, basic survivability can be worthwhile. I'm a little bit greedy though, so I like super heavy AP for a little more alpha damage, but honestly, that's maybe a little too greedy. So going for the extra tankiness is a great way to go once you get a few more points. And then for the equipment, sure, damage control system is great, but with fire prevention and some of these flags and that, if you don't have flags, certainly damage control system. I suppose flags are a bit of a luxury that I do tend to employ, so damage control system is probably better if you're just starting out, but I like the extra maneuverability of propulsion mod. The turret traverse mod here is great because you're going to notice we don't have any accuracy upgrade on the American battleships. We got to wait until we get the 6th upgrade slot. It's a unique American battleship module that is for accuracy, but you only get access to that tier 9 and 10. So that's why there's no accuracy upgrade here. So you can really go with whatever you want. Faster turret traverse is just more comfortable. NC is very good. I think the North Carolina is a really solid battleship pick, and the Akizuki is a really solid destroyer pick. Whichever one you're more interested in, battleships or DDs, faster shooting, slower shooting, these are the two I would really recommend. I really will not talk about the submarine or the carrier much. Just know these are your options. I really don't like these ships. I don't like playing them. So I'm not going to be able to give you much good information or valuable information on them. So check out some other content creators on them. For me, though, I would skip these. Harbin is difficult to recommend. This is a hard ship to play. I think it's got very limited range for a light cruiser at tier 8. The DPM is fine, I guess. You're a very squishy ship. You do have decent utility. Certainly having a smoke screen on a cruiser is very nice to have. Your concealment's quite good, but this is a hard ship to play. So if you're new to light cruisers, I think this one will be quite difficult. The GNAN at tier 10 is a very nice ship to grind towards, but that's a line where I felt like Wargaming made the tier 10 very good, and then the rest of it was a bit of a pain to grind through, unfortunately. If you do end up getting it, this is what I'd recommend. Definitely going more for aiming systems, more focused on main guns. The torps are good enough that we need to buff our consistent damage dealer. You can't always use the torpedoes. Sometimes people are just going to run away from you. So for the Harbin here, I would really recommend going aiming systems. The rest is pretty standard, I would say. As for the build here, looking a little something like this, a little bit of torp buffs here certainly is nice, but once you get a few more points, I think having the extra smokes, having the extra heals, it is a cruiser with a heal, that's nice, but It's a very squishy, very low HP pool you can see here. And that's including survivability expert. So very, very, very low HP on this ship. You're going to die quickly if you're not used to light cruisers. And that's really where I wouldn't recommend Harbin quite as much as Akizuki or North Carolina. It's just not as beginner friendly. And not that Akizuki's that easy for beginners either, but this one especially, you will just explode. So be warned, but it can be a solid ship, and certainly the tier 10 is a really, really nice ship to get. All right, that's the tier 8s through with. Now on to the tier 10s. Again, I do want to play more in these ships to show some more gameplay of them over the next few days and weeks, perhaps. But Shimakaze, I think, needs no introductions. This is a ship that is extremely popular. It's a ship that was released with the game all those years ago, nearly 10 years ago now. And it really has never lost its popularity. As far as torpedo boats, you really have to argue quite hard to look at anything other than Shimakaze in this game. It really just comes down to that. The torpedoes on this ship are just that good. Sure, they're spotted from pretty far out, so people can dodge them a little easier than some of the deep water torps we may see on some of the other lines with gimmicks. And the reload is quite long. But 15 torpedoes that do nearly 24,000 damage each, it's pretty hard to go wrong with that when it comes to a torp boat. You also have great concealment, you're fast, your guns hit surprisingly hard, even though they do have a very slow reload, very slow turret traverse, so they're a little hard to use, but don't underestimate the guns on the Shimakaze. There's times in gunboat DDs where if you're on half or even lower HP and the Shimakaze knows how to use its guns, knows how to use support from its teammates, it's very difficult, even for the best gunboats, to root a Shimakaze out, especially with teammates supporting it. As for upgrades that I would recommend, of course, we're just going to go torp boats here. Really, really highly recommend the 12-kilometer torpedoes. The 8-kilometer torps have better reload, but they lose a little damage. They're much faster, which is nice. But at tier 10, the radars make it quite difficult to use these torpedoes. So get a little more comfort out of the 12s, in my opinion. And the 20 kilometers, I really don't recommend because they're spotted from so much further away. 2.5 kilometers is the spotting range, which gives a lot of ships time to dodge them very easily. Where 1.7 is quite a bit nicer here on the 12-kilometer torps. They're kind of the nice middle ground, I suppose. As for a commander build, just to start with, again, we're going for those same 4 skills up the right side, at least to start with. And then Adrenaline Rush and Torpedo Tubes Reload. You could go a few different ways from here. You could certainly buff up the torpedoes a little bit more. You could add another smoke and another speed boost to get around the map quicker. Use the smokes a little bit more aggressively. You could also go swift and silence to get yourself more speed to maneuver around the map while you're undetected. It does punish you for your main gun's reload time, but hey, you still have those torpedoes, and that's really the focus of this ship. There's a lot of different ways to go, but this is a decent starting point, I think. Shimakaze's great. I think if you're interested in torp boats at all, and you got the points to get up to tier 10, then Shimakaze's always going to be a great pick. On to the Balao for similar reasons with the U-190. It's a submarine. If you're interested in that, there you go. Schlieffen. Okay, Libertad has certainly taken over the spotlight these days, but Schlieffen is still no joke when it comes to secondary brawling battleships. This ship still has immense secondary DPM. It's still got relatively solid armor, and you get a hydro, which the Libertad does not. You, however, do not have the maneuverability of Libertad, nor the HP, nor the armor. You get torps, though, which is very, very nice to have as well. The guns are surprisingly accurate. You kind of get not very many of those guns, right? It's only 8 guns, but they're reasonably accurate, although the actual damage output of the guns and the pen values, they're kind of lower tier 420 millimeter caliber. They're not actually going to be like the GK, for example, where you slot the 420s. It's a little bit worse than that, but that's okay because this ship really, really loves using its secondaries and its torpedoes. There's kind of a triple threat here. There's no one set of armaments that's going to give you the most damage. It really depends on the game that you're in. So I would recommend, if you just want to full send secondaries, then I mean, we're just going to go auxiliary armaments for the secondary buff concealment because we have 12.5 kilometer secondary range and 12.6 kilometer detect. So unless it's a destroyer or a light cruiser that's going to be detecting you, anytime you're detected, you're basically secondarying whatever is detecting you. Very, very powerful. When taking IFHE on the commander, which we'll look at, we actually pen 32 millimeters of armor, which is a very prominent threshold at higher tier battleships. So it allows you to full pen and do monstrous damage. Obviously, concealment, propulsion, damage control, steering gears, all very good options. I personally like propulsion mod since this ship gets the fast damage control teams, which means the cooldown is halved from 80 seconds down to 40 seconds base. Limited number of charges, but it means you don't struggle to fires nearly as much, which is why I'm not taking the damage control system. 4 heals here is fine, but you only get 3 base, so we'll look at the commander build in a second. But there are some limitations to the commander here. And hydro, 5.5 kilometer hydro, not the full 6, but still very, very good, especially when you're pushing in. To know where those torpedoes are is important. HP pool does take a hit because it's more of a battle cruiser battleship. Certainly designated as a battleship still, but it's certainly not a full battleship HP pool or armor. There's some overmatchable spots, but overall it's a very tanky ship because it's so well concealed. It picks its opportunity to push in and can do very well with that. Secondary battery mod, of course, and then more auxiliary armaments. The problem here is if you take auxiliary armaments, your torpedoes have very low HP and will often get permanently destroyed, which sucks. If you take main armaments to buff the torpedo HP pool, then your secondaries have lower HP. Few HE shell hits, permanently destroys them, and that sucks. You got to decide which one you want to keep around more often, I suppose. Initial build looks a little something like this. It's a very build demanding, commander demanding ship, certainly here. So no adrenaline rush, at least to start with, and you'll notice to get all the secondary upgrades and to get to the 4th heal and 5th damage control and take concealment, we lose fire prevention, which is very powerful. It's a bit of a dilemma, honestly. If you're in ranked or smaller game modes, brawls, asymmetric battles, mode shuffle, anything like that, I'd actually recommend dropping concealment. In randoms, it's really useful to have this good conceal, but if you're full sending in those smaller game modes, you're often not actually benefiting from your concealment quite as much, because the opportunity to push is not one that you have to wait for quite as long or be as patient for like you will be in random battles. And because of that, you don't use your concealment quite as much. The other thing to consider is you could drop emergency repair for fire prevention and then go for the improved repair party to get that extra heal at 2 million potential damage. A little harder to do on a ship like this one. It doesn't quite have the tanking ability of a Libertad, certainly, but it can be done. That does mean you know adrenaline rush. So it's difficult. These secondary battleships, these brawling battleships, I will almost always be changing the build up depending on the day I'm feeling. What I want to play like, what's my play style. Do I want to wait and be patient for that push? Then I'm taking concealment. Do I just want a W key at the start? Then I'm dropping conceal for fire prevention. And that's kind of the problem here is if you don't have a lot of elite commander XP or a lot of doubloons, this is a press account, by the way, this is not my main account. It's quite expensive to be respecking all the time. So a little something to be worried about there. But Schlieffen's awesome. It's a very fun ship still. Just because Libertad is crazy these days doesn't mean Schlieffen is bad all of a sudden. It's still very, very strong. Audacious is a carrier, and I'm not really going to talk about these. The only thing I will mention is Tier 8 and Tier 10 British carrier. It feels to me a little odd since they've really varied which ships you get for Tier 8 and Tier 10. So with the Tier 8s, you get a ship and can grind to the Tier 10. Here it's, do you want to get the Tier 8 or the Tier 10? It's a little bit different, I suppose, but that's what we've got here. So just not bad necessarily, just an interesting choice. And now, Gouden Leeuw. This is a bit of a bane of my existence. This is one of the ships that I find to be the most annoying in this game. There's a few of them, Hildebrand, most of the carriers and subs. Just a personal bias there, I suppose. But the airstrikes are very, very annoying here. Even without using the legendary upgrade, which gives you another charge. So base, you only get 2 charges of these airstrikes. This gives you another charge and gives you 25% faster reload on them. It makes it honestly kind of toxic to fight, especially if you run into a triple div. And I know, a bit of a hypocrite right now, caught a little bit here. I have run these divs. I ran the triple Hildebrand div. I've run triple Gouden Leeuw divs, and it's crazy. It's hilarious. But that's really only when you're playing it. When you're fighting it, it is miserable. I would, again, call on Wargaming to maybe limit the number of these you can have in a division. And even without that legendary upgrade, I mean, this is kind of the build you'd go for. Airstrike mod, buffing the reload time on these airstrikes, as well as the HP. That's important. You need most of those planes to get to the target. You have a 15-second timer on the drops, so it's a little tricky to lead these drops. Certainly not easy, but you will get used to it, certainly. 37 mil pen means you pen that 32 millimeter threshold on battleships. Very important. But there are some battleships with 40, 50, 60 millimeters of pen, somewhere in there, even 38 that we see on American battleships that will shatter these. So it's kind of where that Prince, the new steel ship, gets a little benefit. But the sheer number and cooldown and reload on the Howden here is immense on these strikes. The guns aren't bad either. They're 283 millimeter guns, but they have battle cruiser dispersion. So that just means that they're less accurate. And it's because of that, you often are just full sending the airstrikes. You push into an island, and then you drop strike after strike after strike on people. I will say, though, playing this ship or playing the Prince while Malta was playing the Howden, in a certain game we ran into, the extra range on the Prince and more consistent main guns allowed me to actually shoot my guns and drop airstrikes where he was kind of locked out playing the Howden because we only get 13 kilometers of range on the strike. And if you're running reload mod, you only have 16.5 kilometer main gun range. So if you're finding like the games are a little passive, and they certainly are at tier 10, you could go for a range upgrade on the guns instead of the reload. As for the build, also a little bit demanding. You want to be taking focus fire training, partially to buff the AA. If you're sitting on an island, then you're a very good target for the carrier to come strike. So buffing that, but also airstrike armament reload time, helping that out a lot is very nice. So 68 seconds without that legendary upgrade, and it gets below 60 seconds with the legendary mod. Taking survivability expert, just because I like extra HP. This isn't as necessary at these higher tiers. Superintendent is great for the extra healing. The heal on this ship has a faster action time, or a faster reload time, I should say. So you get back to them quicker, 40 seconds instead of 80 seconds. So really nice there, since this ship does take longer duration fires than standard cruisers do. So you got to be healing through that. With double concealment here, we do get to 10.3, a little better than the Prince, that new steel ship. That does allow you to often push up relatively easily to positions where you're going to get these airstrikes off. So that's pretty nice. Adrenaline Rush is also a great option, as it does also impact your airstrikes. So buffing that reload up. And yeah, if I go to this, what do we go from? It's 68 seconds, and if you farm up the research points to actually get it, I mean, it's very powerful. 51 seconds. It's quite a toxic legendary upgrade or unique upgrade, in my opinion. I wish Wargaming had done the opposite with the legendary upgrade on the Howden. I wish it had gone from... it went to a less airstrike focus ship instead of more. But this is what they went for. It sure is funny to play. But yeah, to play against it, not as huge of a fan, to be honest with you. But that is the ships, I suppose. There's a decent variety of options. You got one ship class of each tier to go for. So whatever you're most interested in, there's probably an option for you. For me personally, the better picks here are going to be, well, the tier 10 cruiser, battleship, and destroyer are all excellent choices, really. The cruiser is a little bit more of those airstrikes, but as far as Schlieffen, if you're interested in brawling at all, excellent. Torpedo boat, Shima, excellent choice. In tier 8, I have a tougher time with Harbin, the cruiser, but North Carolina as a very standard battleship is very, very good. as well as Akizuki being more of a gunboat deity. There's great options here with this these holiday gifts, and this is a cool thing. I should mention that this is a positive, very good thing that Wargaming is doing here. It's not premium, but in a way you can think of it as premium. It's a way to shorten the grind to higher tier, get yourself a tier 8 if you haven't been playing recently, or a tier 10 if you played over the last few updates and grinded out those North expedition points, I guess it is. It is very cool. And we'll see what the advent calendar has in store for us, but I think that's gonna do it for this at least overview video. It's a cool event. I really do think this is very interesting, and these are some of my basic thoughts on these ships. We'll get a little more in detail over the next few days and weeks, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and make sure you comment down below what you think of these ships yourselves, if you have them, as I'm sure people can go down there to get some others' opinions on what ship they should potentially get if they're unsure still. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.